Hi, folks. We're Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue that's sort of ping-ponging around online at the moment. That in terms of the United States, at least, and this could apply elsewhere, that 90% of the violent crimes, this is murder, assault, armed robbery, that sort of stuff, violent crimes, 90% of them committed by 2% of the population. In case of the United States, this is young men, black men between the age of sort of 13 and 35. They pretty much do it all. So this is an incredible overrepresentation of criminal behaviour by such a small group of people. Now, this is something that if you go back sort of 100 years, or 50, 60, 70 years in pretty much wherever, whether it's in the Caribbean or the United States or elsewhere, you see more or less the same sort of thing. Now, it depends on the type of policing. For example, when Jamaica was a British colony, the policing was quite strict, and so the crime rate was fairly low, regardless of race. But as soon as Jamaica got independence and the policing of the black areas was treated as racist and fascist and Nazi and swastika and yada yada, then suddenly the crime rates exploded. Now, a lot of the crime, by the way, is black people killing each other or robbing each other or assaulting each other or whatever. So, that needs to be understood. But even when you look at the interracial violence, so blacks assaulting white people is 10 times what it is in the reverse. So this is something that the media and the globalists and all that try and hide and bury. The media don't really want to talk about it. If a white person's violent towards a black person, it's international headlines. They're bellowing around the mainstream media for days, weeks, if not months. But given the many instances of violence against white people by black people, doesn't get talked about. So what do your what do your lying eyes tell you? Well, I can talk about, this is not black bar, this is Arabic, but for some months I was attending, as I've mentioned a number of times before, attending a high school that had a lot of recent migrants from the Arabic Middle East, Lebanon, Jordan, and places like that, and also Malta. But they, if I think about all the violence that was occurring, it was nearly always, not always, but nearly always them. You'd have a bit of Irish sort of violence, but otherwise it was always them. The Irish needed some sort of, the bar was pretty low, but they needed some sort of complaint before they would become violent. Again, it wasn't a big issue, and they would turn quite a small issue or exploit it for violent purposes. But for the ones that were just violent for the hell of it, because they enjoyed it, because they got off on it, it was nearly always the Arabs or the Arabic, and I'll use that as an umbrella term here. And I hadn't seen this sort of thing before. You'd have a rando person who might be violent or unpleasant. That I didn't see. There was always at least one of those in the school, but this was different. This seemed to be almost organised. It seemed to be that they all enjoyed doing it and got off on it and liked to do it. They were just, I don't know, their predisposition to violence and criminal behaviour. This was a school where the police were around almost every day, and some kid getting carted off and so on. So I'd never seen students fighting with teachers before, as in actual fist fights and punch ups. I'd never seen that before, and so this was also new. And so every I think there was one I remember that was a minor scuffle. Um, but otherwise, every fight with the teacher was again with an Arabic kid, so without exception. So why was the violence so heavily concentrated in that population? Did they enjoy violence? Did they think they were untouchable? Did they think that there wouldn't be consequences? Did they think that they could do these illegal law breaking things and not have to face like jail time or prison time, a fine or something like that? And they just didn't seem to care. They had an attitude of your rules don't really apply to me, and if they do, I don't care. It was a strange view. The authority came from the village elder, not from white people in their institutions. So I found that odd. I hadn't encountered that before. Bear in mind, I'm like 11 years old or something at the time. So, but then moving to from there, that was mercifully brief. Moving to an all white school in an upper middle class area, then there was none of that. The thought that somebody would have a punch up with a teacher was just inconceivable. I mean, just inconceivable. And the idea that there would be, people would be, the students at the school would be trying to, commit all sorts of offences and beating people up and getting off on torturing kids and this sort of thing. There's one kid the Arabs got hold of, and they sat on, they somehow pinned him down or tied him up or something like that. Then they used a magnifying, height of summer, by the way, they used a magnifying glass to burn his skin and to torture him. This was some of the stuff. One of them, they brought ropes to school so they could hang someone, as in lynch them off the parallel bars. I mean, can you even conceive of those sorts of things? So this upper middle class school, that sort of stuff didn't happen. So it was very much a set of behaviours that were confined to that group of people. Now, fast forward now decades, and I'm a VP at a company, and the board of directors is putting a lot of pressure on me to hire minorities. They think it's cool and it's a fad and this, that, and the next thing. I'm against it on the basis that, I don't care, actually. I don't mind employing minorities if they're as well qualified as the straight white males that are putting their hand up for the job. If you've got a job, and this is pre-internet job boards, this one I'm thinking of, but a job advert in the newspapers. And I quite... again, I sort of didn't mind. Just the qualified ones in the minority just weren't turning up, so that's why they weren't getting employed. Not because I minded or didn't mind. But anyway, they pestered me. So an American guy who'd married an Australian girl who was a pole dancer, by the way, and he'd married her, and they'd come to Australia, and so he was looking for work. Wasn't doing so well, and then he turned up. He didn't have a African American sounding name. His name was like John Smith or something. So he comes in. He's quite well presented. He obviously was doing a lot of working out in the gym, and it so happened that we had a vacancy coming up for someone to. The sales representative job, handling computer consumables. His job was to go around really to receptionists and the young girls in offices and say, listen, how many bits of computer consumables do you need? I don't know, printer cartridges and that sort of stuff. So he and I thought, wow, he'd be perfect for that. The young chicks will go crazy over this guy. He's like 6'2", 6'3". Doing serious working out in the gym. Quite a good looking guy, I guess. No scars from the ghettos and the like. So I gave him I hired him, and he was a disaster, by the way. But the point I'm going to, he was pretty much every weekend he was getting into a fight. And I mean, how is this even possible, for goodness sakes? Now he's a pretty big solid guy. So and he was this guy just, and I'd ask him, so well, why is it every weekend you're getting into a fight? Because he'd have some marks on his face, some lumps, and he loved to tell. He enjoyed telling us the story, and he'd act it all out, and he'd go into like the boxer's position, and the fists clenched, and then we were fighting, and then I did this, and then he did that, and so he was recounting it as if he was recounting a professional boxing match in the ring, and he loved to talk about it. He really enjoyed it. You could tell. I mean, he's having a lot of fun, and I could hear him in the room where the sales representatives were, sort of just down the hall. I could hear him saying about the latest fight he'd had, and they all listened, because these are all white guys around. Most of them haven't even been in a fight in their whole lives, let alone. And here's a guy doing it sort of at least once a week, and he was getting in these fights all the time. But I asked, I said, look, buddy, it's no good you coming into work Monday morning with fat lip and a lump on your face and whatever. Yeah, that's just not a good look. Why is this happening exactly? And as more intrigued, and he was, there was this guy, the way he was looking at me, he was just disrespecting me, and he pushed past me, and he bumped my wife, and he didn't say sorry, and so I went up to him and said, "You say sorry to my wife, or I'm going to fight you." And the guy would say, "Well, why don't you fuck off?" And so that's it. We had a fight, and there was always things like that, some imaginary disrespect that was being. But the bottom line is there was no disrespect or anything. He was out looking for a fight. That was his thing, and he would proudly say, "Oh yeah, I've had lots of fights," and I tell you, I won every fight. And he would add that just as if it was like some sort of a qualification he was going to put on his CV. So I said, "Look, buddy, it's just no good. I can't have you turning up for work, looking like you've been in a punch up. Oh, but I won. You ought to see the other guy. No, that's not that's not the point." But he couldn't see the problem with it. Why? Who cares? It's just a little fight. Who cares about that? And it was that sort of attitude, and it's pretty much something I've seen. Observed all over the world wherever I've been. Wherever I've been in a place where there's a large black population, it's always the same. So if you look at the violent behavior, whether it be in Africa or the black people in Europe or in the United States, it's pretty much always the same. And it doesn't change when they're in and living amongst much better behaved white people. It doesn't change anything. And if you look at the data out of the US in schools, pretty much every assault of teachers is a black kid, and every school fight, you'd be lucky to find a single school fight that doesn't involve a black kid, so a black boy or girls in some cases, and again they seem to be oblivious. Now, is it impulse control or lack of it, or what is it exactly? Is it just a predisposition to violence? Is it a view that rules don't apply? Is it something else? It's hard to know exactly. But this black guy that I wish who had to be let go, and there was always that simmering edge of violence in his behaviour, and it just didn't go away. And I'd view him, given all the black people I met, I'd view him as being sort of in the upper half of the most cultured black people that I've come across, and yet still he was involved in that idea of that violence is quite acceptable and there's nothing wrong with it. Why are you pestering me about it? What's your problem? Why do you care? And this sort of thing. So this 2% of the population of the US being young black males committing 90% of the violent crimes, it's probably right. What do you think? You've been a Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.